So we're going to head into our third keynote speaker for today. This keynote is about leadership and has the title, Are We Playing Chess or Checkers? And it's based on the premise that we are all operating in an incredibly complex world, right? We have a responsibility for leading a team, and that responsibility has never been more challenging. We're in a world with multi-generation, multi-communication platforms, numerous distractions, as we all know, and team dynamics have never become more complicated. So to talk us through how to navigate through that, I'm going to introduce to the stage Michael Dominguez, who's the president and CEO of the Associated Luxury Hotels International. Please give us a round of applause for Michael.
All right, good afternoon, everybody. I always love having the spot right before a reception, so we're going to try to keep your attention, but this is something I'm extremely passionate about and was honored to be able to be asked to come and share a few thoughts with you. And starting with chess or checkers, it's a real simple premise, and it's not mine. I'm a big fan of Marcus Buckingham. If you don't follow Buckingham, I highly recommend you do. I'm a Buckingham disciple. He is one of the best around strength leadership and how we start to frame what leadership looks like today. And he has a simple thought process between chess or checkers. Not everybody plays chess, but almost anybody can play checkers. And when you look at checkers, if you think the environment of your employees and the environment of your workplace looks like a checkerboard, what does that mean? Every piece moves the same direction. It's pretty simple. Said, then you are managing and you're not leading. If you see your work environment as a chessboard, you're leading. And you know why that is so complicated? In chess, every piece moves a different direction. Your job is to move it in a different direction towards a common strategy. That's the difference between checkers and chess. It's why not everybody plays chess. It's very hard, it's very strategic, and every move leads to another move. I like to mention something to all of my leaders is leadership's a muscle. And it's like any other muscle, it needs to be exercised. What you're doing today will not necessarily be effective tomorrow. And coming out of the pandemic, it is the one thing I told all of my leaders, what we've just done for the last 2 years will not suffice coming out of this. It was good for the environment we were in. It's not going to be beneficial as we continue to move forward. And that requires practice. If you're going to be a great leader, and I am a student of leadership, and I think I'm pretty good at it, and I still practice every day, and I still ask myself, what do I need to change every day? I want to show you a quick clip, and it's an interesting one. Probably without much argument, the greatest golfer to ever touch a golf club. I want to show you one of those greatest shots of this golfer, but then explain why I'm showing this to you.
Here it comes. Oh my goodness. Oh, wow!
That was the Masters, and that will go down in history. By the way, Nike did not pay him enough to be branded Nike, because that little Nike logo is going to be shown throughout history. Now, Tiger, gifted golfer, we all know that, but what most people don't know, that's what a typical day looked like for Tiger Woods. When he was practicing, it was 2 hours of range work on the driving range, followed by 30 minutes of practice putting. Around noon, he played 9 holes. In the afternoon, it was another 3 to 4 hours of coursework. That's what he did for 15 years. He had all the talent in the world, but he developed it through practice. Point is very simple. Doesn't matter how good you are at anything, you're going to need practice, and you're going to need people to point out your blind spots. You know what Tiger has had? 3 of them over his career? Swing coaches. Greatest golfer to ever pick up a club has somebody telling him what he's not seeing. That is what we all need from a leader's perspective. And this is one of my favorite quotes. It's from Charles Darwin. It is not the strongest that survives, or the most intelligent. It is those that are able to change. Are you able to change? Sometimes we are really, really smart and we think that's enough, and it's not. And that is one of my biggest messages I can deliver around leadership. It's about being able to change. I heard this morning, and it was really nice that Stephen actually referenced Admiral McRaven. I'm going to play a couple of things from Admiral McRaven during this session. Admiral McRaven delivered a commencement speech at the University of Texas, Austin, and this was back in 2014. Hands down, it is one of the best leadership speeches I have ever heard. If you don't know Admiral McRaven, he was a 36-year Navy SEAL. He led our Navy SEALs in the United States. He was leading the Navy SEALs when we took down bin Laden. That's Admiral McRaven. Decorated career, served in the field, and served in leadership roles across that time frame. This speech was very simple. It was the 10 things he learned as a 36-year Navy SEAL that you needed to learn if you're going to change the world. And I'm going to play one of these clips right now, because this clip leads into one of my first lessons around leadership.
As Navy SEALs, one of our jobs is to conduct underwater attacks against enemy shipping. We practice this technique extensively during training. The ship attack mission is where a pair of SEAL divers is dropped off outside an enemy harbor and then swims well over 2 miles underwater, using nothing but a depth gauge and a compass to get to the target. During the entire swim, even well below the surface, there is some light that comes through. It is comforting to know that there is open water above you. But as you approach the ship, which is tied to a pier, the light begins to fade. The steel structure of the ship blocks the moonlight. It blocks the surrounding street lamps. It blocks all ambient light. To be successful in your mission, you have to swim under the ship and find the keel, the center line, and the deepest part of the ship. This is your objective. But the keel is also the darkest part of the ship, where you cannot see your hand in front of your face, where the noise from the ship's machinery is deafening, and where it gets to be easily disoriented, and you can fail. Every SEAL knows that under the keel, at that darkest moment of the mission, is a time when you need to be calm, when you must be calm, when you must be composed, when all your tactical skills, your physical power, and your inner strength must be brought to bear. If you want to change the world, you must be your very best in the darkest moments.
Now, how appropriate is that message over the last couple of years and what we dealt with in our industry? And I can tell you, those lessons come true for me. I happen to be, and we didn't mention this, but in my past life, I was the chief sales officer at MGM Resorts. And my darkest moment was very simple. It's when we had the largest mass shooting that we have seen in the United States, and it was at the hotel I was anchored in. Now, how do you stay calm in that situation when everybody around you is freaking out? Now, why am I saying this? Everybody looks to you. And if you were freaking out, they are freaking out. If you were telling them tomorrow will be a better day, you better be believing it, or at least acting like you're believing it. It doesn't mean I wasn't screaming inside, but my exterior was one of very much of composure and calm. And the reason for that, and I'm going to talk a lot about psychology, is this is the problem we have with most leaders today. Strong IQ, very low EQ. And what is EQ? Emotional intelligence. How much do you know about people? That is what moves organizations. That is what makes leaders successful today. You pick up any Harvard Business Review today, and you know what the story's about? Emotional intelligence. Talking about how do we teach people emotional intelligence. You know what we don't teach in universities? Emotional intelligence, psychology. We teach things that strengthen the IQ, not the EQ. And the reason that matters today, everything is about behavioral science. Whenever I speak to universities, the kids always ask me the same question. What advice do you have for me? I always have 2 pieces of advice. First, get over yourself. And then second piece of advice is very simple. Said every elective you can take, make sure it's a psychology course or a behavioral science course. Because your ability to lead people and understand people will make the difference on what is going to matter in your career long term. You know, we don't even take enough of the science in, even though we all know it. We all know that the brain acts differently. We all know that some of us learn visually, some of us learn in an audio perspective, but how do we communicate as leaders? One way. Traditionally, one way. Yet we understand the human brain does not work this way. And if you can start to study psychology, this is the one thing that has really helped me in my career. There is something called the Kubler-Ross change curve. This is what every human being goes through whenever there is change. That change could be organizational, that change could be environmental. But if you look at it, it looks like a grieving curve. It looks like what we go through when we lose a loved one. And the reason this is so important, some people go through that curve in 5 minutes. Some people go through that curve in 5 days. Some people go through that curve in 5 weeks. Yet we make a change in our organizations, and we can't understand why not everybody's on board. It doesn't mean they're bad. It doesn't mean that they aren't necessarily going to get there. It just means they're on a different place of the curve. And if you can start to understand psychology and human behavior, it makes you a greater leader because you're not frustrated when they're all not there. I really get people irritated because I get excited when they get angry. And they're like, why would you be excited? I go, because I know where you are on the curve. Because once you get past angry, it's acceptance. You know the change is permanent. I know they're going to get on board, but they got to get to that point of being a little ticked off. And if you can start to understand that, it makes it a little bit better. Here's the biggest thing about being a leader. This is 5 universal fears that we all have as human beings if you study in any psychology course. We have a fear of death, fear of being an outsider, fear of the future, fear of chaos, and fear of insignificance. You want to be a better leader? Calm the fear. How do you calm the 5 fears that we all have as human beings? And this is what that all means. The fear of death. How do you show and communicate that you're safe emotionally and physically? Fear of being an outsider. How do you make everybody in the know? I know those leaders that we think it's so critical. Look, we're not running a special ops program. Letting people know where we're going, that is an important one. You know what we sometimes do when we talk about fear of the future? Where are we headed and why? We sometimes, it would be like telling an employee or a team member, you drove up to their house, you tell them to get in the car, but you don't tell them where you're headed, what the destination is, or why they're there. How would you feel if that was you in that car? That's what we do to people because we don't explain where we're headed, even if it's not today. Fear of chaos, how do you define expectations? How do you communicate? Communication is really important. I'm going to talk a lot to that. And then fear of insignificance. How do you show appreciation? Strongest 2 words and the most powerful 2 words in the English language, thank you. It's not that hard and it costs you nothing. And we have forgotten our manners. If we could just treat all of our employees with manners, we would be better leaders across the board. When my leadership journey started very young, in high school, I was a student council president back in my high school in Texas, and we actually went to leadership workshops in high school from freshman to senior year. My student council sponsor that was there for 42 years, you know what he told me, and I didn't even know this? He shared this because I went to his retirement ceremony 5 years ago. I was speaking at his retirement ceremony, and he actually said, Mike, you were the only leader that we had this 4th period that was all council for 2 hours. He said, you never said goodbye. You said thank you. When everybody was done, your last 2 words were always thank you. You know what my last 2 words are today? Thank you. When my team is leaving, I thank them for everything that they've done. And the funny thing is when my assistant is coming in and telling me they're leaving for the day, that's not when I say, oh, can you do one more thing? I thank them for everything they've done and allow them to go home. That is the important part of significance. How do you make them feel valued? And sometimes we think it's all about giving them more money or giving them titles. Sometimes it's just showing them that you appreciate what they're doing and you appreciate that you're there. When I talk about communication, this is one of my favorite quotes. It's from George Bernard Shaw. The single biggest problem with communication is the illusion that it has taken place. We think because we've sent out an email, we've communicated. We think because we were in a meeting, we've communicated. Communication is about repetition, and as I said earlier, from the brain perspective, communication is also in different mediums. Some of it has to be visual, some of it has to be repetitive, and some of it has to be audio. You have to understand that. You know what we tend to do? We have a meeting, we announce something, and then we say, we've communicated it. Was everybody at the meeting? Was there nobody that was absent? How are you making sure they're going to get the same information that you were getting, that you got at that point? That's the piece with communication that becomes really a challenge. And when you think about communication today, think about how crazy the world is and how distracted everybody is. This is everything that happens on the internet every 60 seconds. Every 60 seconds, 238,000 uploads of photos on Facebook, 65,000 photos uploaded on Instagram, 120 new accounts created on LinkedIn every 60 seconds. I don't know what this says about our society, but there's 1 million swipes on Tinder every 60 seconds. That's a lot of distraction. And if you think about the distraction, how do you get through it? How do you kind of cut through it? You think it's easy, and you will think that I've mentioned it, I've communicated it, it should be simple. I'm gonna give you guys a little bit of a test. And I'm gonna show you how hard it is to pay attention. This is an awareness test. So I'm gonna show you a quick video, and your job is to count how many times the ball changes hands. You're gonna see some people playing basketball, and they're gonna be passing it. That's all they're gonna be doing. That's your job. We're gonna find out, and you can shout out the answer on how many when we're done. Let me show you the video.
This is an awareness test. How many passes does the team in white make? The answer is 13.
But wait.
But did you see the moonwalking bear?
So those of you laughing didn't see it. And that's the point. In a room like this, some of you saw it, some of you didn't. And that is how we are with our teams when we think they're paying attention. And some of them are, and some of them aren't. This is why communication and repetition is so important to make sure you're getting your message across. I'm going to leave you one other piece on communication, and I do believe this, and this is my quote. It is, and my team has heard it often. I treat everybody the same, but I approach everybody differently. That is not the same thing. Everybody is treated with the same respect and fairness. How I approach everybody is a little bit different. Some of my team members, they need a little more of a pat on the back. Some of my team members just need more space. Some of my team members just want to be left alone. You have to understand that and know how to appreciate that. And by the way, you're never going to find that out without asking a lot of questions. You're never going to find that out without taking the time to understand them. And the interesting thing is, we all know this, one size doesn't fit all. And yet our communication style and how we deal with our teams, we tend to think one size fits all. You heard about different demographics. I'm going to talk about that a little bit more. But I love this quote, be curious, don't be judgmental. And if you're curious, you ask lots of questions about your people. What do you know about your team? I have an every quarter call. Every 90 days, I have a call with every single employee in my company. I have 110 employees. But every quarter, I take 30 minutes, and the time's not about their work. I don't ask them about numbers. I don't ask them where they are in production. We ask them about life. I find out about their families. I find out about one of my assistants that has 25 chickens, and she shows me there's different colored eggs, which I never knew there were blue eggs. I learned that type of information. You know what every one of them says? I've never worked in a company where the CEO has taken time to have a one-on-one conversation with me. That's not that hard. Now, if you're in a large organization, not possible, still possible with the team that you're responsible for, if you want to. And I have one question about leadership. If I was to ask most of you, what is your greatest asset? Most of you would say, my team. And then I have one question for everybody. Does your time reflect the statement? Do you spend more time with your team than you do with emails and in meetings and what we think is so important? Because every time you do that, if you're sitting in front of somebody having a conversation and you even look at your phone once, you're telling them that's more important than the conversation you're having. Put the phone away. That is the hardest thing. When I worked at MGM, I actually had this in a leadership meeting. We were talking about an initiative we were running, and I remember I made the comment, we would fire an employee for walking by a guest and not making eye contact and say hello. But we do it in our own environments and buildings because we walk by them looking at our device. And people do not respect what you say, they respect what you do. Do you live up to the same obligations that you expect them to service? I heard this morning about service. That's what sets you apart. Well, it starts with you. Are you showing him that same respect? And in that meeting, I said, why don't we put the damn phone away and put it into our pockets as we walk through the building, because the world's not going to end in 5 minutes. We can take that time. And our president at that time said, thanks for calling me out, Mike. And he meant it in a really good way, because he says, I'm as guilty as anybody else. And we would not expect that or accept that from our employees, yet we do it to our employees. It's something you have to think about as we move forward. And the reason I say this, you heard about demographics and the 4 generations in the workplace today. I'm a firm believer, demographics do not matter, psychographic matters today. Get off the age and study the behavior. The age doesn't matter. If I like technology, that doesn't make me 20 years old. It means I like technology. If I like to play games, that means I like to play games. It doesn't put me into a subset of an age group. Get off the age, and this goes for customers, not only your team. Don't focus on the age, focus on the behaviors that your team has. Because if you focus on the behaviors, you will cover every age group when it's all said and done. The other thing I will tell you is that we all have an elevator pitch. Everybody has said that. Every company I've worked for, it's like, got to teach you an elevator pitch. I don't believe in elevator pitches, by the way. I think they are so 1980s, and that is something that's so dead and buried. And you know what the elevator pitch was? I got to be able to tell you everything about my organization or my company if we're on the 30th floor and we're headed to the lobby. You know what my question is? What do you know about the person you rode with? Nothing, because you didn't ask any questions because you were too busy talking. That's why I don't believe in the elevator pitch. I do believe in storytelling. I'm going to talk about that. That's a little bit different. Remember that your words can inspire or your words can bite. Wording matters. And the words we use, I am very, very specific and intentional with everything we do. And if there's any message I can leave you with leadership, leadership has to be intentional if you're going to be good at it. There has to be intention in everything you're doing. That takes discipline, it takes focus, and it takes work. And you don't get to have a day off. That's the one thing I learned during the pandemic, because I am the most optimistic, positive person you will find, sometimes accused of being Pollyanna. But here's the point. When I wasn't that, my team recognized it because they expect it and they need it from me. That's what you have to bring every single day. But when I talk about words and how powerful your words are, I'm going to show you a video that to me is the most powerful video I've ever seen that tells you the power of words and why they're important.
What did you do to my sign?
I wrote the saying, but in different words.
Thanks, love.
That video, I see people jerk when they read the sign, and I remind everybody he's still blind, and he was blind when it started. The only thing that changed were the words that were used. Words are powerful, and remember that when you're talking to your team, that what you say, how you say it, it can either inspire or it can cut like a knife. And one way or another, it's your determination on what is actually going to be the meaning of all of that. I can't get away from authenticity. Today it's about being real. People do not follow leaders that are perfect. They follow leaders that are vulnerable. They follow leaders that are willing to say, I made a mistake, and I messed up, and I'm not afraid to say, I'm sorry, I missed that. But I love this quote, and this is Bill Taylor. He was a co-founder of Fast Company. And you can see we live in a world where ego gets attention and modesty gets results, where arrogance makes the headlines, but humility makes the difference. C.S. Eliot said, true humility is not thinking less of yourself, it is thinking of yourself less. And humility really matters if you're going to be a servant leader today. And you've got to know that leaders are not private. People want to know who their leaders are. That's why you're going to have to be authentic and you're going to have to be vulnerable. You realize you picked up any business publication 10 to 15 years ago, a product was on it. Today, you cannot see a business publication that does not have a person. We want to know who the leaders of these companies are. Leaders will switch companies, or a company will switch a leader out, and the stock will explode. And they haven't done a thing. The only reason it's moving is because we know the leader, we trust the leader, and understand that you're in this fishbowl and people are getting to know you. And I love this quote. It is my favorite quote from Ralph Waldo Emerson. What you do speaks so loudly, I cannot hear what you say. People are going to watch your actions, not your words. And the problem is if your actions don't mirror the words, it doesn't matter what you say or how often you say it, it's never going to have the same impact. And there's a lot to focus on, but look, I saw Peter Drucker was referenced in Stephen's presentation this morning. This is my favorite quote from Peter Drucker: culture eats strategy for breakfast. I know I'm at a rock conference. You know what I know? There's a lot of strategy in this room. How much culture do you have? Because culture is what makes it happen when it's all said and done. I'm a believer in this. I can have all the strategy in the world. There's some great sports teams, have all the talent in the world. They have no culture and they can't bring it all together. That is what you have to understand and where you have to spend your time. Harvard showed you that strong cultures boost net revenue by 756% over an 11-year period. There's a book I would highly recommend if you've never read it. It's called The Culture Code by Daniel Coyle. It looked at some of the best organizations that built cultures. And by the way, my simplest definition for culture is, what is the worst behavior you're willing to accept? Because that's your culture. Doesn't matter what your words are. What behavior are you allowing to be in your organization that you don't believe should be there? Your culture is not a mission or vision statement. It is the worst behavior you're willing to tolerate. And I've had to let some people go because I wasn't willing to tolerate it. And that is very important to me because I believe in culture, preach culture to my organization. And you know what my organization does? They start to question my commitment to culture when I allow someone in the organization to remain that doesn't fit it. And that fitting the culture is very simple with us. It's about respect, and it is about how we treat each other. It's that simple. Those are the pieces I'm talking about. And in that book, they study the San Antonio Spurs, which I'm a diehard San Antonio Spurs fan, born and raised in San Antonio. They're a basketball team, if you're not familiar with them. They were the most winning franchise in any sport over a 30-year window that ended 3 years ago. And during that time frame, and I've actually seen their locker room, by the way, they have this quote in their locker room, and it's a quote from Jacob Riis. He was an immigrant rights activist in the 1920s. It's the only thing in the locker room. And the quote is very simple: when nothing seems to help, I look at a stonecutter hammering away at a stone more than 100 times with no success. And on the 101st strike, the stone will split. And I know it's the 100 strikes before it that split the stone. Every one of my team members has a rock on their desk with this story, or a rock at their home with this story. Because our mantra is very simple, we're just pounding the rock. And pounding the rock is a very simple mantra, is, are we better today than we were yesterday? Because it is a process and an evolution, and eventually we will split the stone. And that was me when I got to go see the locker room, by the way. Got to go in there and know that it was actually there. And what was interesting is, this is the story I just mentioned. That's in the locker room. Going up to the locker room in the Spurs organization, that story was repeated 4 different times because every time they brought an international player to the team that didn't speak English, they translated it into their language. Because their culture was special enough to say, we know who you are, we know where you come from, and you're part of our family. And we respect that. That is attention to detail around culture. And then I'm going to leave you with belief, because belief is something that is required to be able to lead a team. They're going to have to look at you for hope. They're going to have to look at you to be able to move us forward. And when I look at that, One of the greatest stories around that is Roger Bannister. And if you don't know the story about Roger Bannister, he was the first human being to run a 4-minute mile. And up until that time, for 30 years, everybody had tried to run a mile in 4 minutes, and nobody could ever do it. And everybody said it would be on a perfect day, on a perfect track, with no wind. And by the way, he ran it and broke the 4-minute mile on a muddy track with a windy day and rain coming down. But when he broke it, here's the point. Within that year, it was broken 4 other times. And within the next 3 years, it was broken over 30 times. Because once we believed it could be done, it was able to be done. That's how human beings are. And by the way, it's your responsibility to give them that kind of hope. And I'm going to leave you with what's your story. Here's the final video for you. And I'm a big fan of Simon Sinek. I heard him mentioned again this morning. But here's a 1-minute clip on Simon to end this off, because I think it's a great visual on storytelling.
The way that Phil Knight used to talk about Nike, I don't know if you've ever heard the story. He was speaking at a large conference, and he stood up and he said to the audience, if any of you have ever run for exercise, can you please stand up? Most of the room stood up. He said, if you run at least once a week, please keep standing, everybody else sit down. Most of the room sits down. He says, if you run twice a week, please keep standing. He says, if you run 3 times a week, rain or shine, regardless of the weather or the temperature, please keep standing. There's now a smattering of people in the room. And he looks out at them and he says, the next time you're out there before the sun is up, it's dark, it's cold, and it's wet, and you're running by yourself, we're the ones standing under the lamppost cheering you on. That's how he described Nike. In an instant, you understand what just do it means. It has nothing to do with winning, it has everything to do with trying. It has everything with doing. And his story, his ability, his narrative captured that so exquisitely. And when Nike's at their best, they celebrate the ones who do, not the ones who win.
Talk about storytelling. How well do you tell your story? And can you be a good storyteller? There's techniques to it. I would definitely take a look at it online, because that is something that you'll really have to be good at as you move forward. I'm going to leave it there, but thank you for your time. I hope this was enjoyable for you, and thank you for the invite.